Wednesday edition of the NBA Exchange. I'm your host, Dexter Henry, and last night in the NBA, there was a lot of action in a lot of different ways for different teams. We'll get all into that on today's edition of the NBA Exchange. So much going on, so much to talk about in the world of basketball, but it's Wednesday. You know what time it is, NBA with Nuance. That means my man Jarod Hector is here to join me to talk about things that aren't hot takes. You know, we like to say every week, we're talking about things that aren't hot takes at all. Jarod, what's up, man? How you doing?
I'm good, Dex. Listen, you know how we do here. No hot takes. We here for the nuance. None of that crazy shit. Although, last night and this morning, NBA is wild. You know, I tweeted this out last night, Dex. How can anybody who considers themselves a sport fan not be a fan of the NBA? Like, I don't understand that.
Well, you do tend to sometimes get the people who are like, oh, college basketball is better than the NBA, which is a whole nother ridiculous notion because nobody would ever say that about any other minor league in any sport being better than that. So you can kind of read between the lines with the colors and see what that's about there. We kind of know what's going on there. I call bullshit on that all the time. So it's whatever. But it was a wild night in the NBA, Jarod, and I'll start off with what I said was probably the most exciting and interesting game earlier in the show. And that was the Trailblazers against the Nuggets. Double overtime. Some people are going to want to call this an instant classic, whatever you might call it. Dame Lillard drops 55. That's really exciting. But the Portland Trailblazers lose. Not so exciting for them.
Yeah, that was a hell of a game. Dex, double OT. I mean, Damian Lillard, let's just give that man all his flowers for that game. I mean, he single-handedly beat the Nuggets by himself, almost, right? He was damn near perfect last night. I looked at the stat between the two overtimes. I mean, what did he score? 19 points he missed one or two shots, and the rest of the Blazers combined were like 1 of 18. I mean, Dame was sick, and we can get into Mike Malone not fouling when he should have, not doubling, all that stuff, but Dame's a killer, man, and when we've seen this happen, that was a hell of a game. Jokic, the likely league MVP, was excellent down the stretch as well. Denver found a way. And I remember I picked this series at the beginning. I said Nuggets in 6, and I knew ultimately my issue was the Blazers' inability to get stops when they needed to. I thought Denver had a little bit more ability to actually get stops in it, and it bore itself out. The other thing to look at in that game, guys were tired, man. You played a full game and 2 overtimes, and tired players make mental mistakes. You saw it. Covington, bro, just lay the ball up twice. You don't even got to dunk it. Lay it up. CJ, just brain fart, like stepped out of bounds. Like, when you are physically tired, you will make mental errors.
That's a great point there that we saw. I talked about those 2 mistakes at the top that basically cost the Blazers the game right there. And this will evolve, I'm sure, into a larger situation if the Blazers do lose this series about does Dame have enough from him? Is it time for him to move on to Portland? What Portland can do? That'll all be there. But you talked about the spectacularness also of Jokic, which I think is lost in this contest, and how he made some big plays, including a huge big-time pass to your boy, MPJ, to hit the game-winning shot. How big was this for the Nuggets? Because we know all the numbers, Jarod. We know when a series is tied at 2, that it's an overwhelming majority of the time the team that wins Game 5 wins the series. So how big was this for the Nuggets?
It was huge. You know me, Dex. I'm big into the analytics and the numbers, but I'm not a slave to them, right? There are other pieces of the game that matter. And the emotional letdown after losing a heartbreaking game like a Game 5 in double OT with Damian Lillard's best playoff performance. I mean, he's at 1 million, but that's probably his best if I go off the top of my head. That's got to be gut-wrenching. So you got to come back home in 48 hours, win Game 6, which you could very well do. But then you got to get on a plane, head back to Denver, and win on the road again in Game 7. And that's asking a lot, again, particularly after the emotional toll that took out of you losing a Game 5 like that. And that's the thing about the playoffs, right? These things, and there's no stat. I can't measure and tell you, well, because they did this is what this means. I don't know, but I know losing a game like that means something. How much and what? I don't know, but it matters. And now you got to win the next 2 now, right? It's tough. That's a tall order.
All right, well, losing a game, just to transition from that, how you lose a game, you're right, does matter, can carry over emotionally to the next game. The Lakers just got their ass handed to them by the Phoenix Suns in Game 5. And so they got blown out by 30 points. The Lakers have other things to worry about. Anthony Davis, we don't know if he'll play in Game 6, did not play in Game 5. He's not healthy. Can LeBron, didn't look like it last night, but can LeBron lead this team to what they have to do, which is win 2 more to win the series. Mr. Numbers, do you like the Lakers to do this after they got beat down by 30?
It's so funny. On the number side of it, I don't like it at all, right? I said Phoenix in 7 to start as I picked this series. And I knew LeBron and AD, I was like, the health don't look good. AD's already out again with the growing. Shout out to Charles Barkley calling him Anthony Street Clothes Davis. That was savage. Damn, bro, you got to rip him like that. But, look, this is also, so that's the numbers part of it, right? It just doesn't look good for the Lakers. But this is also LeBron James propaganda season.
Here we go.
So what this means. The stories are already starting. Blown out in Game 5. A hobbling LeBron James, no Anthony Davis. Heading back home for Game 6. This is the footage for his Last Dance docuseries that's going to come out 20 years from now. This is it. This is all LeBron looking like grandpa. Father Time has finally caught up to the king. All this stuff, right? And then, something happens in Game 6. He gets every single foul call. All of a sudden, he's getting to the rim at ease, 40-something points. You can see it, right, Dex? You can see how this is setting up for propaganda.
What I can see is that if he has a great performance, it sounds like you're not going to give him the credit for it. That's what I can see. That's what I can see. I don't know, man. All I'm saying is what you're saying is absolutely possible. And it's possible that in the Game 6 or Game 7, LeBron gets poked in the eye again. This time he's seeing 6 rims and he hits some incredible shots. That could happen too. I'm just saying all this is possible. It's all possible. So, but you do not like the Lakers' chances of coming back in this series.
I just don't, because I think Phoenix is confident. And look, young guys, and I know we'll talk about this later. Sometimes you're dumb enough to not know what matters, right? Like, these guys ain't playing for no legacy play, right? With the exception of Chris Paul, Devin Booker and DeAndre Ayton, this ain't no legacy play for them. Mikal Bridges, they're just out here playing. LeBron's the one that's got legacy to play for. The Lakers, can we go back to back? The pressure's squarely on them. Even though the Suns were the 2 seed, nobody, except for very few people, myself included, said the Suns could win this series. Everybody's like, LeBron, AD, they got this. No, man, the pressure's on them now. And if they have no AD in Game 6, the Lakers are going to have to find a way to hit shots. Nobody can hit shots on that team. KCP, where you at? Kuzma, where you at? Caruso, where you at? Wesley Matthews, what's good? Morris, God, you can't even play Trez. These guys, I don't know. Again, the numbers tell me no, but LeBron likes telling stories, and he's a narrative creator. So I wouldn't be surprised if some funny business happens all of a sudden in Game 6. But I like Phoenix, man. Devin Booker had a hell of a game last night. He's that dude. He's highly confident. And if once Chris Paul's on the floor and he's looking relatively healthy, the Lakers have had no answer for what the Suns want to do. So I'm liking Phoenix.
Yeah, 37-5 for Devin Booker last night. Let's move it to the East Coast. Some news right before we decided to record surrounding the Boston Celtics. I think many people expected eventually there would be a sort of shakeup with the team. Maybe not the way this worked out. Danny Ainge is retiring as president of basketball operations. Brad Stevens no longer will be on the bench. He is now moving into that role in the front office. This was reported by multiple people, including Adrian Wojnarowski from ESPN as well too on this. Were you shocked by this move? I don't know if it's necessarily shocking because there had really been a lot of talk about change. And do you think this is good for Boston? Because now they'll be searching for a new head coach.
Yeah, I think you're right. Shocking wasn't the word because we knew change was coming, right? And it had kind of been whispered and talked about all season, right? Is Brad on the hot seat? You and I, and on many public podcast platforms, we joke about almost Danny Ainge trade season, right? Every time something comes up, Danny Ainge almost made a trade, and all his sycophants in the media who cape for him talk about how great Danny Ainge is. Look, they had a championship run with the big three of Kevin Garnett, Ray Allen, and Paul Pierce that Danny Ainge is a part of, and Rondo and Perk and all that crew, right? They had that famous Nets traded, look at that, they fleeced the Nets, blah, 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 all this stuff. And you got Tatum and Brown out of it, no doubt, 2 elite wing talents that are under the age of 23. Wonderful. You've been to some conference finals, cool. But Danny has not built the roster around the rest of those guys, right? The Kyrie thing didn't work out. Kyrie's getting a lot of blame for that. Doesn't seem like he was really all the problem there. Seems like a lot of other things going on there too. Gordon Hayward thing didn't work out. Tristan Thompson didn't work out. Kemba Walker hasn't worked out. right? So, I think for Danny, look, it's like, hey, maybe it is time for a new voice. And for Brad, I thought this is interesting. The stories are coming out that he felt worn down by the bubble and all this stuff. And I'm not saying he wasn't, but what coach wasn't worn down by the bubble? I mean, what coach isn't just worn down, period? And the idea that you're going to spend more time with your family if you're a head of front office, basketball operations, I don't think so, man. That's a whole different type of pressure in that job and a whole lot more kind of work, as it relates to building a franchise. This could be interesting. I'll be curious to see where they go with a head coach. Of course, the popular names have been floated around already. Jason Kidd, Lloyd Pierce, David Vanderpool, etc. It'll be nice to see, a black coach get a shot there, at least for an interview. Shout out to Doc Rivers, last coach to win a championship with the Celtics. Just putting that out there.
Yep.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what they do. You certainly, if you are coming into that situation as a coach, at least, all right, I got Tatum and Brown. That is a good start because we talk about it all the time. Elite shot creation and shot making from the perimeter and from the wing is what you need to win in this league. They got two of them dudes. Okay, so we're good, but we need more pieces around them to fill it up. And we'll see if Brad can be, help facilitate that and see what the next coach is.
It's going to be interesting because Brad Stevens has had no experience in building an NBA roster. So that hire is interesting as well, too, that a guy with no experience just jumps from the bench to the front office.
You know how that goes, Dex. Certain people can get jobs without experience.
Yep, we know how that goes. And they don't look like us.
Certainly not.
Let's talk about some game fives tonight, right? And whether these teams can close them out tonight. You got Hawks, Knicks at MSG. You got Jazz, Grizzlies in Utah as well, too. And then you have the Sixers back home trying to close things out against the Washington Wizards. Do you like any of these teams to end the series tonight and move on to the second round?
To be honest, I like them all to end it tonight, if we're being honest. I think, look, I love my Grizzly Cubs, but, I think Utah is just such a disciplined team. And even if you get close within a few possessions as the Grizzlies did the other night, Utah just executes down the stretch, right? They just find ways to get into their action and get their stuff. So I like Utah to win that one tonight. I think the Grizzlies, of course, will fight till the end. I think Philly, even though they won't have Joel Embiid likely, I don't think that's been announced yet, but it's looking kind of shaky. They should have enough to take care of the Wizards. They have some other issues I have to worry about as far as making free throws down the stretch. And, if your lead ball handler is not someone who can make free throws, and that being Ben Simmons, that's a bit of a problem. The game that'll be the closest, I think, will be Knicks-Hawks. Look, I think the Knicks are going to come out with all the aggression, with everything that they need. That crowd's going to be into it tonight. I just think that the Hawks, take away all that intangible stuff. So if you look at it, just match up across the board. The Hawks just got more offensive options than the Knicks do. They can score more points. And ultimately, that's what matters. I think they'll win it.
Yeah, that Knicks offense has been, tough to watch. Tough to watch. Our producer, Greg, has not been happy watching the Knicks offense. Now, last week, when we did NBA with Nuance, we talked about our favorite team, the Los Angeles Clippers. And we know the motto, Clips are going to Clips. And at that time, the Clips were down 0-2. They had lost 5 straight playoff games. But now, just maybe, Jarod, just maybe, they have turned things around. They've won 2 consecutive playoff games on the road, including Game 4, where they were down 30-11 and came back to get the victory. Kawhi and PG are looking good. You said, and I'm para-quoting here, you did not believe they could win 4 out of the next 5 games after being down 2-0. Didn't like the odds, didn't like the numbers on that. Now they have it back at 2-2. They've got to win 2 out of 3. They've got home court advantage again. The Clips going to clip in Game 5? Are they going to pull this series out? What do you see happening for the Clippers? Have you changed and done a complete 360 on the Clippers here?
Every time I think I'm out, they pull me back in.
Oh, man.
Shouts to my guy, Al Pacino. Look, it is, the playoffs are so interesting, right, Dex? Because on the one hand, you have variance and you have small sample size, right? Like a playoff series, even if it goes to full 7, that's a small sample size relative to the full amount of games. And, you looked at the Mavericks and I was like, man, they're making every possible 3 in their first 2 games. Well, that didn't happen in games 3 and 4, right? Particularly towards the latter end of game 3 and in game 4, right? You sort of revert back to the mean. Kawhi and Paul George have been otherworldly offensively all series, really. and they tie it up at 2. Look, we said it before. The Clippers are a more talented team and should be able to win and should be able to get the requisite stops necessary on defense. And if Luka is hobbled and his neck is infringed and he can't, turn his head to the side, it's going to limit his peripheral vision. That's a problem, right? Because here's a guy who relies on seeing all the angles and seeing the whole court. If he can't, that's big. Look, if the Clippers win Game 5, as we talked about, you go up 3-2. That's huge because now the Mavs got to go and win 2 in a row, right? Including 1 in LA. Now, they did win the first 2 in LA, so it's not like they can't do it. They've shown they've won in LA, but has it switched, right? Are they feeling a little bit differently? And this is the kind of win that if the Clippers somehow manage to reel off 4 straight, that's going to buoy them. Again, I don't know what it means is from a measurable standpoint, but to get beat last year after being up 3-1 on the Nuggets and to be down 0-2 this year to the Clippers and come back and win in 6 or 7, that will do something to galvanize this squad.
I could absolutely see that. It's almost they needed something like this. They needed a sort of bounce back performance. We'll see if they can seal the deal, folks, because at the end of the day, they still are the Clippers. They still are the Clippers. Now, wanted to talk about a particular topic on this NBA with Nuance. We want to talk about youth in the postseason. Mm-hmm. We've seen some really impressive performances by some young players in this postseason already. You mentioned Devin Booker in his first postseason. He's been excellent in this series against the Los Angeles Lakers. You can also look at Trae Young and what he's done carving up the Knicks as well. Ja Morant has put up really solid numbers against the Utah Jazz. A lot of times we talk about inexperience in the postseason and how that can hurt the young player. And they need more experience, but we're seeing some of these young dudes show up for the first time. Who has really impressed you in terms of these young stars in the playoffs? Is it some of the guys I mentioned, but who's really impressed you as a young star that's shown out here in the 2021 postseason?
I mean, honestly, that's all the guys you mentioned. I love what I'm seeing. The big thing that I'm seeing again is the stage does not seem too big or too bright for them, right? These are all playoff neophytes you mentioned, right? They don't got any playoff experience, but they're not overawed by the stage. And the crowds are back and everything, and they seem unfazed. Trae in particular, man. Listen, that Garden crowd, loud and hostile. And this dude, you can already see, he is, I mean, and we know about Trae. You read it, you know his story, you know his backstory, being doubted and slighted his whole life because of his size and all that. He just carries that with him and that chip on his shoulder. And the boos and all the Trae's balding and all the that just emboldens this dude. Like, it's fuel for his fire. And it's like, the guys like that don't need more. And when you can come out on the road and dominate, that is so big to me. So I'm loving what Trae is doing. I'm loving what DeAndre Ayton's doing. Look, what is DeAndre Ayton most famous for? Not being Luka Doncic, right? Like, that's the thing. Him and Trae Young were both in that Luka Doncic draft, and everybody's like, Luka's and we know what Luka is. Of course, Luka's the best player of that crew right now. But listen, I think Phoenix and Atlanta are very happy with who they picked. Ayton's gotten good defensively, and he is winning the Anthony Davis matchup right now, which is part of the reason why the Suns are up 3-2. And, he's just, as a young big man, he's gotten better. He's nimble, he's athletic. And again, he doesn't seem overawed by the moment. When I'm watching the young guys, Dex, in games, I'm always looking to see, all right, when a vet like LeBron or Harden or one of these big-time superstars comes down and they go on their own personal 8-0 run, or you get a foul that you don't believe is a foul, they get an and one, and they're starting to cook. How do you, as the young player, respond? Does your head duck? Does your shoulder slump? Or you like, man, I can't stop these dudes. They're great. None of these young dudes are doing that. They're taking the punches and they're like, I'm good. It's fine. I'm going to go back at it, right? And it's amazing to see, again, without having the experience, because we know the physicality ratchets up a whole other level in the playoffs. Guys know what you're doing. Teams know all your moves. But for these guys to be able to handle it and excel, I love it, man. I'm impressed.
Yeah, you got to be impressed with it. But conversely, on the other side, not every young player has risen to the challenge in the way some of those we've mentioned. Who has disappointed you when you look at some of the young players in the postseason, maybe for their first time getting on this stage, that haven't seemed to have risen to the occasion?
I mean, it sounds like you're picking on them. You look at all up and on the Knicks roster, right? I mean, besides Derrick Rose and Taj Gibson, who are veterans, everybody else on that roster, you've been like, not great. Julius Randle's first playoff experience, not been great. RJ Barrett, not been great, right? And quickly, mixed. It's just, and I don't want to say that, it's because those guys aren't as mentally tough. It's not that. I just think it's matchup depends on it a lot, who you run into, right? And I think for the Knicks in particular, this Atlanta team is such a buzzsaw, right? And with the way in which the Knicks identity is, which is toughness and grit and grind and all that, that matters. But this is a league about skill, right? And we're seeing it now. Yeah, you need to be tough, no doubt about it. But you got to have skill. And that more than anything is what you're seeing. The teams that have skill and the players that have skill, all those young guys I mentioned, while they are tough mentally, they're also highly skilled. Skill is what matters. You're able to shoot, create your own shot. And I think what you're finding is, while toughness was the identity and Barrett and all these young guys bought into that, not that they're not skilled, but their skill isn't as refined and at the level of some of these other players we've been talking about.
Right, and that definitely matters. So if you have a high level of skill or you are very mentally tough coming into adverse situations, crowds on the roads, like you mentioned, it begs the question, does playoff experience actually matter? Because we're seeing young guys step up here in big-time moments on the road, having performances. And some of these young players that we've talked about could lead their team to the second round of the playoffs after getting a taste of this for the first time. So does player experience truly matter in the postseason? Can we see, or are we going to see in the future, Jarod, younger guys like this come into their first postseason and truly make an impact?
Yeah, it's like everything else, right? Playoff experience does matter. How much it matters, there's not a measurable that tells me, right? But yes, if you are a coach or if you're in this situation, do you feel more comfortable with LeBron James executing in a one-possession game with under a minute left down late versus Ja Morant? Of course you do, because the body of work of LeBron suggests he knows what he's doing because we've seen him do it time after time again. But it's like everything else. And I always go back to this conversation I've had with Shaquille O'Neal one time. We're talking about the Rockets, and that was the year that they took the Warriors to 7 games and Chris Paul got the hamstring at the end of game 5. This was before that. This is right before the playoffs. We're talking about teams. And I said, Shaq, about the Rockets, man? I just like what they're doing this year. And he's like, no championship DNA. And I was like, but Shaq, nobody has championship DNA until they win a championship. And in his usual gruff Shaq voice, you're right about that. Like, I just, it is until we see it, no one believes, right? It doesn't mean it's not feasible or possible. Could there be a scenario where I just mentioned where LeBron falters in a playoff game down the stretch in a one possession game and Ja Morant succeeds? Of course it's possible. It's just we haven't seen it and we don't think it's likely. That doesn't mean it can't happen, right? So I think, again, with the amount of skill these players come into the league with, younger guys, I can make things happen because of their skill level and their toughness and their belief. I mean, these guys work on their game 24/7, right? It's way different than it was in the 80s, right? Where you're like, rookies, coaches don't want to play rookies because you're going to get killed by Larry Bird and Kevin McHale and Robert Parrish. Like, all right, but it's not that time now. So many guys now just have this ability and believe in themselves. And when they step on the floor, a guy like Book, you don't think Devin Booker, when he gets on the floor in this series, doesn't think, I'm the best player on the floor. Even with LeBron James and Anthony Davis over there. That dude 1,000% thinks he's the best player on the floor every time he steps out there. And there's so much to that, right? That again, I don't know how you measure it, what it means, but that belief in oneself means that you can execute when the chips are down.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely seeing that. That is a commonality with these young players. You're seeing that are succeeding in the playoffs. You're seeing that confidence for sure. We'll see if you have confidence in these Game 5 picks or confidence in the Clippers coming back and closing out this series. But Jarod, another good NBA with Nuance Wednesday. Thanks for joining me, man.